The Sacramento Kings have narrowed their head coaching search down to 3 finalists, and the list is uninspiring. So much so that Lakers fans are even celebrating. Mark Jackson, Steve Clifford, and Mike Brown. Cue the crickets chirping sound effects. We'll talk about these 3 coaches, what these 3 finalists say about what Monty McNair is looking for in his next head coach. It's all in today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. Just wrapped up my 8th season covering Sacramento Kings basketball. Looking forward to season number 9. This is year 5 of me hosting the Locked On Kings podcast, and I currently work for ABC 10 News in Sacramento. And I, like most of Sacramento Kings Twitter and most of those that I saw react to this Kings list of coaching candidates that was tweeted out today by both Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams from The Athletic, I found myself very underwhelmed by the 3 names that the Kings have narrowed their coaching search down to. Specifically, general manager Monty McNair has narrowed his list down to 3 veteran NBA coaches: Mark Jackson, Steve Clifford, and Mike Brown. And there's one name out of that list that has most of Kings Twitter up in an uproar. Although that name I've seen many times in my comment sections and in my email inbox from Locked On Kings listeners saying they wouldn't mind him being the Kings head coach. We're going to talk about all 3 of these candidates, their NBA history, why they may or may not fit with the Sacramento Kings, who I would prefer out of the 3. That's all coming. But before we even talk about the candidates, we have to talk about what these 3 candidates say about what Monty McNair is looking for. Clearly, McNair is looking for a coach with already significant NBA experience, someone who has been at the helm of an NBA team before. Now, while it somewhat makes sense that McNair and the Kings would want to bring a proven name in here who has done it before, who can take this Sacramento Kings group and hopefully bring them to the next level, bring them to the playoffs that they obviously haven't been there in 16 seasons. When you look at the amount of first-time head coaches that are having tremendous success in the NBA right now, like Ime Udoka with the Boston Celtics, you can talk about the season that Willie Green had with the New Orleans Pelicans. There is clearly an argument to be made for why giving coaches their first opportunity, especially coaches that have been on benches, working as assistants, coming up from film room guys, all the way to a head assistant role, all the way to being deserving of a head coach role. Those guys have proven that it's not so much of a risk to take giving them their first opportunity anymore. But even so, if McNair wants to go the route of taking a name like a Mike Brown or like a Steve Clifford instead of Darvin Ham, then I guess I understand it. So that's been made perfectly clear now. 4 of the 7 candidates have been informed that they are not part of the next level of interviews. And I believe one of those 4 is actually Mike D'Antoni, who was initially reported to have interest from the Sacramento Kings for taking this position. Now, I'm a bit skeptical that it was the Kings saying they're not interested in D'Antoni, not D'Antoni saying he's not interested in the Kings. I really wish if the Kings were going the route of hiring a former NBA head coach, it was Kenny Atkinson on this list of finalists, but Kenny was never on the list to begin with, which suggests that even Kenny Atkinson, who's the lead assistant with the Golden State Warriors right now, Mike Brown is also with the Golden State Warriors right now. it would appear Kenny Atkinson wasn't even interested in the job to begin with. And he was one of my favorites to become the Kings' next head coach. That also tells a lot about the situation. There are only 30 NBA jobs. And Kenny Atkinson's like, you know what? Nah, I'm good. Now, he could be holding out for the Los Angeles Lakers job. And speaking of the Lakers, I mentioned this in the opening. Like, as soon as this news came out that these were the 3 finalists for the Sacramento Kings, I saw Lakers fans celebrating, laughing, applauding, because I don't know if they're interested in Quinn Snyder, who could be on the outs in Utah. I don't know if they're interested in Darvin Ham or any of the other young guys that the Kings were interested in. But, I mean, when you got or a whole nother fan base, really not just Lakers Twitter, NBA Twitter, which is no surprise. The Kings are low-hanging fruit. Almost everything the Kings do gets laughed at. But overall, we're talking about maybe the most uninspiring list that the Kings and Monte McNair could have come up with. Now, none of this matters. None of it matters at all if the Sacramento Kings hire a coach who gets this team to win. None of it matters. And hopefully, one of these 3 guys does get hired, leads the Kings to their first playoff berth since 2006, and more importantly, is the head coach of the Sacramento Kings for the foreseeable future, which could be another reason why the Kings weren't interested in Mike D'Antoni, or Mike D'Antoni is not in this position to begin with, because D'Antoni is 70 years old. How much more time does D'Antoni have in the NBA, right? Not that Brown and Clifford are that much younger, but regardless, there's the possibility of any of these 3 coaches, Brown, Clifford, or Jackson, being here for 6+ years. That would be a win for the Sacramento Kings. If one of these 3 coaches is here for that long, that means something is going right. But of course, seeing this list, many Kings fans, and there's part of me as well that feels that the Kings have almost removed all chances of that long-term success happening, because again, this is not the most inspiring list that the Kings could have come up with compared to all the candidates out there. Now, I know that Kings Twitter was in love with Darvin Ham. I know that there are a lot of Kings fans that were interested in some of the younger guys that Jill Adge talked a lot about with me earlier on this week when we went through the initial list of Kings candidates. There were a lot of young, looking for their first opportunity coaches that had very impressive resumes that I think could have done very, very well with this roster. But again, Monte McNair seems to be prioritizing someone with NBA experience already, which again, I understand. I just hope it works out. Especially when the first-time candidates list was looking a lot more attractive than the list of guys looking for their next job. There's a reason why these guys are out of a job and are looking for their next job despite having NBA experience. Another thing we have to address, and I am choosing to operate one way or think one way, even if I have my skepticisms. We need to address the possibility that this is not Monte McNair's list. This could be Vivek Ranadive's list, especially when you have 2 former Warriors coaches, one current Warriors assistant, the former Warriors coach, and Mark Jackson. We know the Sacramento Kings under Vivek Ranadive have tried to be the Golden State Warriors time and time and time again. The first coach that the Kings hired was actually a first-time coach in Mike Malone, came from Mark Jackson's staff with the Golden State Warriors. Of course, Mike Malone should still be here, and if the Kings were smart and didn't blow it and fire Mike Malone, he would still be here, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, period. But I digress. Here's how I'm choosing to address these concerns that are potentially valid. Monte McNair has said time and time again that this is his team. He's the one making the decisions. We have not seen any reports to the contrary, period, since Monte McNair was hired. So all we can do is take people at their word. However, I do not blame Kings fans. I do not blame skeptical media. I do not blame anybody for having those thoughts, fears, concerns, looking back and recognizing patterns over the 9 seasons plus that Vivek Ranadive has been here in Sacramento now. I don't blame them at all, because until the Kings start winning games and it's obvious that Vivek and ownership involvement, ownership meddling isn't happening anymore, there will always be that question. But that's not a get out of jail free card for Monte McNair either. Monte is not off the hook for committing to Luke Walton and then firing him 20 games in. Even if it comes out later that Monte had no power in that decision and Vivek and the Kings ownership group made that decision for financial reasons, that would be catastrophic if that information ever got out. And I don't think that information will ever get out, nor do I believe that's 100% true. McNair is still responsible for that move as the general manager of this basketball team. That is a basketball decision. Therefore, it is connected to McNair, whether he made that decision or not. And unless McNair comes out and says, this was not mine, my hand was forced, which again would be catastrophic, then everything is attached to him. So even if Vivek wants Mark Jackson, because when Vivek was a minority owner with the Warriors, Mark Jackson was the coach there, or he wants Mike Brown because he's coming from the successful Golden State Warriors coaching system right now, led by Steve Kerr, not to mention he was the head coach of LeBron James with the Cleveland Cavaliers for a while. Even if there are dots to be connected, this is still, for me, going to be looked at as completely McNair's hire. So therefore, seeing this finalist list, I am ready to criticize McNair, question McNair for, again, in my opinion, the uninspiring names that are on this list when I feel better names are available. We're also not in the room for these interviews. We also don't know what other candidates may or may not have said. Maybe they presented ideas that McNair didn't agree with, that weren't what he's planning on doing. All we can do is trust McNair to make his hire and make the right hire for the Kings going forward, but we don't have to like it. I think that's what's important here. And trust me, there are going to be fans that really don't like it if the Kings decide to hire Mark Jackson. I'll explain why. Plus, we'll talk about Mike Brown and Steve Clifford after I tell you about a great sponsor here of the Locked On Kings podcast. I'm talking about Built Bar, the protein bars that taste like candy bars. Summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. You can throw them in your bags and your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you are fueled for all of those summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and they're delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food so that you can eat healthy. With Built Bar, you can have both. It's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. Built Bars, the puffs, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy that chocolate flavor that you love. And if you haven't tried the Built Puffs yet, if you don't even know what they are, they're protein-infused marshmallows. Yeah, that's a real thing. And they're delicious. You can try their banana cream pie, even churro flavors, so many crazy flavors of the puffs out there, plus amazing Built Bar flavors for you to try. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. That is the average for most of these Built Bars. Compare that to a candy bar, it's a complete blowout. Candy bars have around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com, order some puffs, order some bars, order both. Whatever you order, make sure you use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. Again, it's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, I wasn't one of these people on King's Twitter ready to light something on fire or break a window when they saw Mark Jackson's list as one of Mark Jackson's name on the list of candidates for the Kings head coach position, let alone the list of finalists for the Kings head coach position. People are losing their minds, and you know what? They have a right to. Not to mention, when that tweet came out that Jackson was a finalist, boy, NBA Twitter had a field day. Boy, oh boy, did they have a field day. Mark Jackson has not coached since 2014. The 2013-2014 season was the last time he coached. He's had one job in his coaching career in the NBA. One job. That was head coach of the Golden State Warriors For 3 seasons, he was at the helm of the Warriors. And you know what? He did damn good. First season was rough. 23 wins, 43 losses. Yikes. Warriors were still kind of coming to their own there in 2011, 2012. Second and third season, 47-35, 51 and 31. That's a 57% win percentage and a 62% win percentage. So how in the world did the man lose his job? Well, one, Steve Kerr came swooping in and the Golden State Warriors became the empire that we know they were. And Mark Jackson does deserve credit for setting that foundation. He started what became the Warriors dynasty. However, the reason why Mark Jackson was fired and the reason why Mark Jackson hasn't gotten a job since is because he was surrounded by drama. So much so that there were notably potentially hundreds of people that were part of the Warriors organization that did not like him. Some say, I've read reports, hated him. There are times and rumors, reports that Mark Jackson would take credit or not give credit to his assistant coaches. There are reports that his assistant coach and Mike Malone was really the guy running the show while also playing diffuser and playing peacemaker amongst that locker room and that situation with Mark Jackson at the helm. There have been articles that have been shared today by Sacramento Kings fans of homophobic comments that Mark Jackson has made. Also had some personal issues as well. Jill Adge said it best when we were talking about it earlier this week. Mark Jackson, there are basketball reasons for why you would be interested in him being the head coach of the Kings. There are reasons to believe that Mark Jackson could be a successful head coach in Sacramento. But no matter what happens, Jackson is going to come with a lot of drama. And while I don't think it's in the best interest of the Sacramento Kings to make the safe pick, or I don't even know if there is a safe pick in this coaching search, the Kings have a real tendency to ying when everyone else is yanging, go right when the rest of the league is going left. And somehow this man hasn't gotten a job. Mark Jackson hasn't gotten a job in nearly a decade. The rest of the league, there have been plenty of vacancies. He's been interviewed before. Nobody has given him a job. So the Kings might. I don't want the drama either. Plus, even if Mark Jackson is capable of leading this team to the playoffs, even if he's capable of ending that drought, how long do you expect Mark Jackson to be at the helm of the Sacramento Kings when he got the Warriors going, but then was ultimately replaced to take them to that championship level? Like, I know you have to take it one rung at a time. And I could say this for all three of these candidates. You have to take it one rung at a time. We would all celebrate the Sacramento Kings next season being a playoff team, even if they're a first round exit. Would we not? Let's be honest here. We all would celebrate that. But after you reach that rung, then that next offseason, we're looking at, okay, where do the Kings go from here? And then after that is where do the Kings go from here? So it's like, okay, you want the Kings to be, let's say, a 7th seed, and they win their first play-in game and they're in and they get swept in the first round. Who cares? Following season, you want them to be a top 5 seed. Following season, hopefully they're a top 1, 2, 3 seed and they're competing for a championship. Now, it doesn't always happen that way, but that's the ideal climbing the rungs of the ladder. Mark Jackson has only gotten to that first, maybe second rung before he was booted, even if he had an impressive win percentage. But all that drama that comes with it, and we've had our fair share of drama. Hey, Vlade Divac was all about character matters, and that didn't work. So maybe the Kings are going to go the exact opposite route. Hey, character mattered, that failed. How about character doesn't matter? Maybe that'll work. I'm joking, of course. I'm trying to be fair because everybody makes mistakes, and Mark has said some weird, dumb things and done some dumb things, and hopefully he's learned a lesson or two in the near 10 years that he hasn't been a head coach and has been searching to become a head coach again. And I do try to give him the respect that he deserves for the seasons that he had with the Golden State Warriors. But man, you talk about making that higher. Day one, he takes the podium and he has to answer for a lot of the things that happened in Golden State. Even though they were 8 years ago, he has to answer for them. Day one. Is that the guy you want to hire as your first full coaching hire as a first-time general manager? I don't think so. We're going to talk about Steve Clifford and Mike Brown. I'll tell you which one of these three I would pick, I guess, as the next Kings head coach, or the guy that I want to see get the job out of the three. And I'll tell you all of that after I tell you about BetOnline, the number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can bet right now on BetOnline which one of these three will actually get the job. I'm serious. You can bet on it right now. Have fun, make some money off of this. You can also bet on all sorts of things like the NBA playoffs going on right now. You can bet on Major League Baseball happening right now, golf that's going on, UFC fights. They have it all. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends and the action. Make money off of your sports knowledge and your Kings suffering at BetOnline, where the game starts. I wouldn't mind seeing Steve Clifford get the job. I would be okay with Steve Clifford becoming the next head coach of the Sacramento Kings. Steve has been in the league for a very, very long time as both an assistant and a head coach. His last head coaching position was 2020-2021 when he coached the Orlando Magic. Now that team, of course, was god-awful at 21-51 before he was fired towards the end of the season. But he is a very well-known defensive-minded coach, which the Kings are in need of defense. I saw someone say that they would appreciate the defense that he could bring in, but also think that he could bring in that defense, or another lead assistant could bring in a defense like that at that position rather than at the helm. Steve Clifford overall, I wouldn't be too mad at being the next head coach of the Sacramento Kings. I don't really know what more there is to say about Steve Clifford. He's been to the NBA playoffs 4 times, never made it out of the first round, swept his first time with Charlotte in 2013, 2014, went 7 games in 2015, 2016, also for the Charlotte Hornets, and then made it twice with Orlando in 2018, 2019, and 2019, 2020, winning just 1 game in the first round of either series. He's gotten there 4 times, and again, we'll take the Kings getting there, but after they get there, can he make that next jump? His history would say he's struggled with that. But you got to, I guess, walk before you can run. If I had my pick out of the 3, I guess my pick is Mike Brown. Mike Brown is very well respected around the NBA. So is Steve Clifford, but very well respected. Has been an assistant with the Golden State Warriors under Steve Kerr for a long time now. I believe he's in his 6th season. 6 seasons with the Golden State Warriors as one of their lead assistants there. Before that, he spent a long time, most well known for his time with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers in a 5-year stretch. One of those years, the Cavaliers made the Eastern Conference, or rather the NBA Finals, and they were Eastern Conference champions. That was the year that LeBron James and the Cavs were swept by the San Antonio Spurs. Now, he had a very impressive 66-16 season in 2008, 2009, but again, not as much success in the playoffs necessarily as you would expect for a team that did that well. Never winning an NBA championship with LeBron James, that is notable, of course. Then went and spent 2 seasons in LA with the Lakers. Didn't do that much, had a 41-25 record, and his really 1 full season with LA. Was fired after just 5 games in 2012, 2013 with the Lakers, then went back to Cleveland for 1 more season, went 33-49 in 82 games there, never made the playoffs. So the last time Brown made the playoffs as the head coach was 2011-2012 with the Lakers, went 5-7 in the playoffs there. But overall, he's had a lot of success in the NBA playoffs, never won a championship while having the best player in the league at that time. Kings, of course, don't have that best player. So with a average roster, what could he do here in Sacramento? Well, he's proven to at least not just get a team to the playoffs, he's gotten them deep into the playoffs. So he has that experience there. He has the respect, he has the expertise. I believe day 1, Brown would come in here and have the respect of the Sacramento Kings locker room. They could buy in and believe the things that he's saying. I hope he's not just a finalist because he's on the Golden State Warriors staff, even though it's a good thing he's on that Warriors staff. He probably has learned a whole hell of a lot from coaching under Steve Kerr. Or maybe he's helped Steve Kerr in a lot of ways as he was the more veteran coach before Steve Kerr. Regardless, out of the 3, Mike Brown is my pick. Mike Brown is my favorite, and it's not particularly close. But I'm not super inspired by Mike Brown. I'm not, because I know what he's done in the past, and I know it's had a cap versus, again, some of the younger names that we haven't seen what they can do yet as NBA head coaches, obviously. So there's the fear of the unknown, I guess, but they've paid their dues and maybe they can grow as this team is trying to grow. If I were Monty McNair, even if I didn't do the interviews, this would not have been my list of 3 finalists. And I had my fingers crossed for a while that there was going to be a 4th, but James Ham tweeted a few hours ago that was not going to be the case, that these were the final 3 and they would go into in-person interviews coming up next. Also, important to note, Mike Brown is 52 years old. Steve Clifford is 60 years old. So I said earlier, they're not much younger than Mike D'Antoni. I misspoke there. They're pretty significantly younger than Mike D'Antoni, both as well as Mark Jackson. I guess all of them have the potential to have long coaching tenures in Sacramento, but I wouldn't put my money on that, and I wouldn't hold my breath to say the absolute least. What is your thoughts? Any of your thoughts? Who would you pick out of this list? Your thoughts on what Monty McNair is doing putting together this list? I want to hear them. Send them to me at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. We can go into more in-depth looks at all 3 of these candidates if you'd like. We can also talk once the Kings do decide who that coach is. We can talk about what needs to happen from that coach in order to actually be effective here in Sacramento. My fingers are crossed as tight as they possibly can, so much so that I'm crushing circulation to these fingers that it's not Mark Jackson. Even if basketball-wise, I could see it potentially working, I don't want that drama. I don't want to have to come here on the Locked On Kings podcast and talk about the Kings hiring Mark Jackson. I don't want to have to deal with the laughter from around the NBA. So I'm just going to hope and pretend that this is really a 2-man race between Brown and Clifford. And again, if I had my choice out of the 2, I'm taking Brown. But I want to hear who you're taking. I want to hear your thoughts on this finalist list. Again, send them to me at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate you joining me on today's episode of Locked On Kings. Hope you'll join me for the next episode, and we'll find out what the Sacramento Kings are going to do. The offseason is just getting started, so keep it right here on the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.